Hello and welcome guys to a bit of Broken Arrow testing. This is Lima's playground, as you can see, and we're going to be testing quite a lot of tanks against many other tanks. Now this setup takes absolutely ages, as you can see in the corner, so if you do leave me a like, comment and subscribe, that'll be very nice of you because it really helps the channel out. But as I say, all this testing does take a bloody age, and what we want to do is test the American and Russian cannons and tanks against each other to see who comes out on top. So we're starting with the Armata firing at the Leopard, which has got the thickest armor in the game. So as you can see, I'm actually quite surprised that the best cannon of the Russians is taking 3 shots right there. Now we're firing at the SEP V3 now, and again, very similar. It is identical on paper, the armor, so again 3 shots. But what actually starts to surprise me is this sort of perception is that all tanks are 2 shots on PTE, but clearly, as you can see, shooting in the front armor, even with the best cannon in the game for the Russians, that's absolutely not the story. And this one surprised me slightly more. Like the FEP and the SEP V2 do have the same armor, and it's only the Abrams, so a very cheap tank indeed, that becomes the first kill. Now these 4 tanks, yeah, they're going to take 2 shots, there's no doubt about it, just because of how paper thin their armor is. But it's already got me thinking, like, the Armata should surely be able to do more damage to the other tanks. And I know it's different for obviously side shots, but even 3 shells does seem a bit much from the best cannon in the game. Now we're going to flip it over to the American side. Oh, just before I do that, let me say thank you to my sponsors. You guys are absolutely great. I really appreciate all you helping me. And I'm just showing off the armor values here, where it's 750 and 1300, or as soon as it drops below 650, that's when it becomes a 2 shot. And now remember that number. So 650 is the magic number for the American tanks. But when we try it out here against the Russians with the American cannon, which is 25 points better, but it is the best cannon in the game, not just for the Americans. Actually, yeah, no, okay, so I fucked it. I forgot to upgrade it, so that's the 105. That is not the best cannon. It is now. There we go, we've relaunched it. So as you can see, it does more penetration than the Armata, this one, which is pretty crazy, but fair enough. It's a feature of the game that the Americans have better tank cannons overall. Let's have a fire. So yeah, Sprite is obviously 2 shot from basically any vehicle. There's no surprises there. We're moving on to the slightly thicker stuff, and again, just because of how good this gun is, there's no surprises either against either of the T-72s that they're both 2 shot. You might notice that the Americans are actually accidentally at a slightly higher range than the Russian ones, but yeah, we're just firing at the weak tanks for now. Here's the armor values: 650, 700, both 2 shots. Okay, let us fire at the T-80s now. So there we go. We've just done slightly under half damage, and this is the Coastal Marine one, so it's got extra thick armor with extra HP, which is why that actually took 3 shots, which again is to me very surprising. The Dross, by the way, it's got APS, but otherwise its armor is pretty thin. Yeah, 2 shots, no surprise there. It wasn't actually at an angle, like it was of course, but it was aiming at front armor, so don't worry about that. Here's the T-90s. Now as you can see, both are going to take 3 shots here by how it looks. Yeah, which is super surprising for the T-90A especially. For 230 points, that thing is very resistant to enemy tanks and dishes out a fair amount of damage itself. So that was the most surprising part for me in this test. Okay, Thunderbolt's going to shoot at the Armata, and I think no one's going to be surprised there that even though this is actually, you know, the best gun and the similar armor to the American ones, it is the same in many ways. We've got the exact same results where it's either way 3 shots to kill a tank. Even so, yeah, 850, 1400. For this it's 800, and for that it's 750. So for the Americans, the magic number was 650. For the Russians, you need 750 to withstand, to make it a 3-shot tank. That is the magic number. We see the difference here already, which is, again, a little bit surprising in my opinion. But overall, it's a good test to see that, you know, not all Russian armor is as paper thin as you might imagine it to be. And actually, in most cases, it performs extremely well, especially for its price. So we're going to redo the test now, but with what I'd say is a medium tank cannon. So we'll let the Americans go first this time. This Abrams is 450. As we've already established, American tank penetration is on average higher than Russian ones, even for similar priced units. But they also have slower fire rate and are usually ever so slightly less mobile. So we'll fire them all at the same time. Here we go. Obviously no surprises that the Sprut is the only one below half damage. But actually I'm not sure this is how it should be in Broken Arrow. Again, with respect, that is one of the weakest cannons, but that T-72 on the end being able to survive that much, even at this range. Okay, my mistake there, that Abrams on the end, yeah, I did fire the Armata, killing it. But those tanks being able to survive that much heat is actually kind of shocking to me. And it's the same story for the Russians shooting at the Americans. Now, obviously, there's no surprise here. So 425, again, that's pretty representative of an average Russian gun. Like I say, it's 25 lower than the American ones, but we're not going to be surprised to see that these guns, even though, again, remember, by accident, I put the Russian tanks ever so slightly closer, but I think these common results might be so ever so slightly shocking for you here. So let's open fire. Nice. No surprise about the bottom 4 tanks. Their armor's paper thin. The Buckers has the same armor as the M60, by the way, so that's why I didn't put it in. So yeah, the bottom tanks are going to be 2-shot kill, no doubt about that. You can see that the medium armor tanks, so the Abrams and the HC, are obviously going to be 2-shot there. With these tanks, strong ones at the top, so the SEP V3 and the Leopard, it's actually going to end up being 4 shots, which is, yeah, kind of crazy here. Whereas, remember that the Russian tanks took 3 shots, even with the medium cannon. Now, all of them took 3 shots, whereas here we had the strongest ones take 4, which in itself I find a little bit surprising. Especially, once again, considering that the Russians were closer. Right, with the weakest gun, I mean, this really isn't a very informative test. We all know that the penetration of guns does matter, and the strikers are supposed to be used on the flank. So we're just going to fast forward here because it's kind of a silly test, but as you can see, anything with half decent armor can withstand quite a lot of punishment. And essentially, okay, yeah, the strikers are now out of anti-tank munitions. They're just firing HE, so obviously it's just tickling the armor here. It's not going to do anything. But like I said, this bit is just a bit of a gimmick, but it's to give you a little bit of awareness about how to use your tanks. The striker cannot be used on the front line. Don't even bother. Look how little damage it actually does, even with the abundance of ammunition that's been fired at it. Onto the Russian side, I've got the mighty BMOP Taurus Rapira. Again, the 4 right tanks on the right are going to do awfully well, but when it comes to the rest of them, the Russians actually do fairly alright, and that's because they're firing heat. That's why it does a bit more damage as opposed to Armor Pierce and Finn's Stabilized Discarding Saber. But even still, these tanks do take quite a few hits. And essentially, again, the moral of the story is that those tanks are not... I mean, these are 45 points, to be fair, but they are not to be used against other armor unless it's paper thin, or you just use it as fire support against infantry there. And that is the key lesson with the strikers especially. You got to keep flanking. Right. Hope you're learning loads from Uncle Lima here, because we're going to do some more interesting tests. Like I said, those tests were potentially all over the place because... the ranges, well, that's not meant to happen. Right, sorry, where were we? Yeah, those were unstandardized tests. We're trying to make it a bit more standard with each tank shooting at each other. Bear in mind that their armor is the same, and we've got the best cannons in the game now. So you're just going to see the difference in how much faster the autoloader does make an addition here. So the Armata is firing much quicker, which ultimately means that in a straight fight where they both take 3 hits, the Armata should win the engagement every time. And that's where the disadvantage of the armor-piercing penetration versus the autoloader comes into play. And I think it is actually perfectly balanced. When we look at the tanks overall, I think it's quite clear to see, and very fair to see, that actually, despite America's seeming advantage with the higher penetration, it is very situational. Overall, the Russians should have a faster fire rate, slightly cheaper armor, and you know, I think it's quite fairly balanced, especially with the penetration values that are now very, very, very important. Before you didn't really care, but now you got to pay attention to them. And I think it's perfectly well balanced that, you know, some tanks take 2 shots, the super thin ones. You know, some of the medium ones take 3 shots, and some of the extra heavy tanks against the average shells take 4 shots to kill. But is that fair overall? I mean, perfectly balanced, I think, genuinely, from a balance point of view. But from a hardcore realism kind of standpoint, is that fair, especially if you start shooting the side? I'm not convinced. I think that maybe more tanks being 2-shottable, especially at that range, because remember, we're not at the maximum range, isn't too fair. Right, a city test now where we've got S8s, Hydras, S13s, and Zunis firing at tanks. Now, again, at the thickest armor in the game, 1,400 armor for all of them. Not sure why the autocannon's firing there. Let's switch that off. But you can see the S13s just absolutely ripped that tank to shreds. Zunis are doing pretty good too. Then the S8s come in second with their 40 shells. And then the Viper with the guided Hydras didn't do too well at all there. So quite an interesting test. It is just a bit silly, just for show. But there we go, that's how it works out. So the S13s are definitely super lethal, and you should be very careful. Now, before we move on to another test, we'll do a fan favorite. You guys seem to really enjoy this one, which is, yeah, I think pretty funny. Like, just how many hits can this tank take, and how many MTLBs does it actually kill? You can see it panicking in the middle there. Cool, bit of fun, why not? Yeah. The last thing we're going to do... Oh, don't know what happened there and why these guys didn't fire. They didn't kill anything, so yeah, whatever. Let's move on. And welcome to the last test that we're going to do, and that is laser-guided arty versus tanks. Now, all these tanks are the same statistically, apart from the top arm of the Sep V3, which is thinner than the Armata and the Leo. So if we just go through it one by one, firing at the Sep V3 first. We'll get the laser on. Let's go. Bang. Damn, that's actually surprising. Usually, that can be a 2-shot kill. Let's have a look at against the Leopard. Now you can see it's done a lot less damage. Way less damage there. And not even 4 shells to kill it. And I think that is because they're targeting the the side armor. Is it not far enough to get the arch, the shell arch going? Okay, possibly not. Okay, Armata, let's hit him. Yeah, I think maybe because of how shallow the shell is going, it's actually hitting its side armor as opposed to the top. Or is the damage just really that much more reduced? Okay, moving on. We'll see how the markers perform. Bear in mind that these are the biggest shells in the game these days. Ouch. Yeah, still not enough. And these, still not enough. So the tanks overall have become a bit beefy against artillery especially, which is quite interesting to see. Feel free to do testing of your own for this. This is just for you to get a quick understanding of how it all works and how ineffective it can be. You might think that it's changed quite a lot from the previous vanilla to this current PT, and yeah, all these little tests are the reasons that we do it, just for the sake of testing for you guys. Right, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. Bye bye.